What's up, everybody? Welcome to DeathGroundReviews. So Stephen King mentions in his book Danse Macabre that he finds terror to be the finest emotion. His main aim is to terrify the reader. However, if he can't terrify the reader, he will try to horrify the reader. And if he can't horrify, he'll go for the gross out. Horror and the gross out, they're kind of the gut punch effect on the reader. That pure shock emotional reaction. Terror, on the other hand, not only impacts the reader emotionally, but also hits them on the intellectual level. These are the stories that more quietly get under your skin and linger there, resonating the creeps days after you put the story down. Pet Sematary, I'm thinking of you. I think King's take on terror applies well to the subgenre I'll be discussing today, literary horror, or what is also called art house horror. So what is literary art house horror? I see it as horror stories that are more focused on the language, that are interested in character study and character development, that like to use innovative and experimental narrative techniques. Literary horror also likes to dive more deeply in thematic argument and symbolism. To put it another way, it's a lot like literary fiction. It's just dressed up in a horror costume. You know, some might argue that these kind of horror stories are trying to dress up in the fine attire of, pretension and self-importance to appear in college bookstores or impress higher culture. And maybe there's some truth to that in some cases, but regardless, I think there are still some great authors and some great stories in this subgenre. So Peter Straub immediately comes to mind when I think of literary horror, particularly his novel Ghost Story. It's one of those books that has just that vibe of Henry James or Hawthorne. So it's a story set in Millburn, New York, and revolves around the Chowder Society, this group of elderly men who gather to tell ghost stories. But they're also bound by this dark secret, and this malevolent force threatens to unravel their lives. And in literary horror, it's a slow burn. You're going to get a lot more backstory. You're going to get a lot more character depth. And Ghost Story definitely utilizes those elements. And you definitely get a strong thematic argument in this book. I would say it's about shame and pride. And it tells us that we must confront our past to survive the present and thrive in the future, which is kind of the main theme of, every ghost story. But yes, I highly recommend you check out Ghost Story by Peter Straub. So there's another book in this subgenre I've got to mention. I've got mixed feelings about it, but it's funny, I just Googled the top 5 scariest books. And this book was on the list. I think it was number 1 or 2. I don't remember the main source of who made the list, but the book I'm talking about is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. And so it's a story about a man who finds a manuscript about a family's documentary, the Navidson Record, which details their experiences in this strange house. And the guy becomes just engulfed by the text, and his life is drastically changed by it. And there was part of me that's fascinated by this concept in this book, and it's a perfect example though of art house horror in that it uses an experimental narrative technique. It uses what they call the ergodic style, which requires active, engaged reading and co-creation by the reader. That is intriguing. And I remember at times when I was reading it, I was literally, having to turn the book sideways and upside down. And I just couldn't finish it though, guys. It was too much work for me personally to get fully absorbed in the story. And maybe it was just the wrong time for me to read it. Maybe I ought to try picking it up again down the road. Maybe I'll enjoy it more. I don't know. But let me know. What did you think of House of Leaves if you read it? Did you enjoy it? Do you feel like, some part of your mind is still wandering lost in the pages of that book? But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. So some other authors to look for in the literary horror variety are like Elizabeth Hand. She has this book called A Haunting on the Hill, and it seems to revisit Shirley Jackson's Hill House. Sounded really intriguing to me. You have Caitlin Kiernan. You have Brian Evanson. I'd even put like Jennifer McMahon and her novel The Winter People in this category. It also overlaps in supernatural horror. You also got to count some classics in there. Henry James definitely would fit in there. You got Oscar Wilde and the Picture of Dorian Gray. And, there are definitely some art house horror movies out there. I would put like The Witch would probably fit that category. It came out, 2015? There's one that Rami and I reviewed that I personally really like. He doesn't like it. He's not a huge fan of the art house thing. But Jacob's Ladder, starring Tim Robbins, that's a great movie. Check that one out. Check our review out too. But I definitely would put that in the art house movie category. But yeah, that concludes my introduction to the literary horror subgenre. Let me know, guys, your thoughts about the books that I discussed. Let me know some of your favorite literary horror novels and art house horror movies, and we can enjoy some discussion. But this is DeathGroundReviews, the monster that devours horror, suspense, and all those things of the fantastic. I'll see you next time.